today's mindful moment, packed with insights but designed to fit into your busy life. Close your eyes for a second and imagine the Santo Domingo that Urania Mises returns to after 35 years. It's not the hushed and fearful Ciudad Trujillo of her memories.
Right.
This is a city exploding back to life. Car engines roaring, music pouring out of every doorway, horns creating this crazy symphony of sound. Even New York City, with its constant buzz, hadn't prepared her for this sonic boom.
Yeah.
What really struck you about that immediate sensory overload she experiences?
It's the intensity of that contrast. That's key here. It's not just the noise itself, it's what that noise represents. See, that silence, that oppressive silence is gone. It suggests a kind of breaking free, a society finding its voice again. Even if that voice is a bit rough around the edges at first.
I see what you mean. And this vibrant, almost aggressive soundscape is the backdrop for Urania's journey, a journey deep into her fragmented and often painful memories of the Trujillo regime and her father's role in it all. Today, we're diving into Urania's internal world, her thoughts, observations, and feelings as she steps back into this transformed reality. We'll also examine how her interactions with others reflect the lingering shadows of the past.
Yeah.
And amidst all this, we'll be pointing out those quieter moments of reflection, those glimpses into the character's inner states. We're calling them mindful moments.
I like that.
So our goal today is to really understand Urania's complex emotional journey and the lasting impact of history on individual lives, all through her very personal perspective.
I think that initial encounter at her father's residence really highlights that weight of history. Her hesitation, the almost fearful way she identifies herself, like, I'm Urania, she says, Augustin Cabral's daughter. It's such a simple statement, but it carries so much unspoken weight.
Absolutely. Before she even fully steps back into her past, she's confronted with these echoes of it. Like when she remembers Senator Augustin Cabral's comment about Haitians, great ills demand great remedies, which stands in stark contrast to the actual presence of Haitians she sees in this city. What did that juxtaposition tell us about the society at the time?
Well, it reveals a pretty dangerous disconnect between the regime's rhetoric and the everyday reality. That casual bigotry that he just throws out there, probably stemming from Trujillo himself, clashes so sharply with the diverse population Urania observes.
Yeah.
It really highlights the hypocrisy and the deeply ingrained prejudices of that era.
Yeah, it's eye-opening. And then we get those almost dreamlike glimpses into Trujillo himself.
Right.
Waking up from nightmares, yet so obsessed with punctuality. It's a strange combination.
It is. It offers us a look into the anxieties that can even plague the most outwardly powerful figures. That need for rigid control, down to the minute, could very well come from a deeper, maybe subconscious fear of chaos.
That makes sense. And then there's his calculated cruelty.
Yeah.
Like the anecdote about Maria and the false amity slogan. The way he minimizes her contribution and twists this shared moment of affection into a tool of dominance.
Yeah, it's chilling. It's a perfect example of his need to exert complete control, even in personal relationships.
Wow.
By rewriting their shared history, he reinforces his own power and undermines any possibility of a real, genuine connection.
So it's all about control. And speaking of control, the regime's aggression is obvious in that radio broadcast attacking President Betancourt.
Yeah.
And then the almost casual mentions of plane crashes and political enemies.
Right.
It's like the state is constantly on the attack.
It was. That constant stream of propaganda and threats served to demonize anyone they saw as opposition, whether internal or external.
Okay.
Reinforcing Trujillo's image as the indispensable protector of the nation.
So everyone had to fear him, even within his inner circle. Remember Lieutenant Amado Garcia Guerrero? He said Trujillo's gaze was digging up my conscience.
Right.
Such a strong image of that psychological control.
It is. It really speaks to the almost mythical aura of power that Trujillo built around himself, where even a look from him could inspire fear and judgment, highlighting this pervasive climate of surveillance and repression.
But even in this suffocating atmosphere, there are these small signs of resistance starting to emerge. Like the men in the car quietly talking about the bishop's pastoral letter, their faith giving them a different kind of moral authority. What's the importance of that seemingly insignificant act?
Well, it shows the beginning of these alternative sources of authority, ones that challenge Trujillo's absolute power. The church, through the pastoral letter, dared to voice its dissent. And those men, even if they were cautious, show that there's this growing unease and a longing for different values.
Yeah.
It's a small act, but very significant.
And then there's Antonio de la Maza, his opposition to Trujillo fueled by a very personal tragedy, his brother's death at Trujillo's command. It makes it clear that resistance wasn't always some abstract concept. It was often born from very real pain.
Absolutely. These personal acts of defiance, driven by profound loss and injustice, were so important in chipping away at the seemingly impenetrable facade of the regime. De la Maza's story is a perfect example of that raw human desire for rebellion.
It is. And the way they planned the conspiracy against Trujillo, all those secret meetings at 21 Mahatma Gandhi, it just highlights the immense danger and the unwavering commitment of those involved.
Yeah, the risk they took plotting against a dictator like Trujillo cannot be overstated. Those clandestine meetings over such a long period show the dedication and meticulousness of the conspirators.
Right.
They knew the potentially fatal consequences of failure.
Shifting to Urania's story again, we see her visiting her sick father. The nurse makes this innocent comment about life being better under Trujillo. It's jarring to see how the past can be viewed so differently.
It really is. It reminds us that historical memory is so complex. For some people, maybe those who benefited from the regime or were shielded from the worst of it, they might hold on to this romanticized view of the past, one that completely contradicts the experiences of others like Urania.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that comment really sparks Urania's internal turmoil, bringing back the unresolved trauma connected to Ramphis Trujillo and Rosalia Perdomo. It hints at these deep personal wounds.
Yeah, this is where Urania's individual suffering connects to the bigger story of the regime's abuses. The mention of those names suggests the sexual violence and impunity that were so common within Trujillo's inner circle.
Right.
They left lasting scars.
For sure. Her emotional distance from her father is obvious. Hanging up on his calls, destroying his letters. It really shows the depth of her resentment over his complicity.
Absolutely. Her refusal to engage with him shows a profound sense of betrayal, a complete breakdown of their relationship as father and daughter,
Right.
all as a direct consequence of his involvement with and support for the regime.
And looking at what happened to Trujillo's children, it's like even they weren't immune to the turmoil. Ramphis's death in that car accident, which many suspect was no accident, Rodami's murder, Angelita finding religion in Miami, it paints a very turbulent picture.
Yeah, it shows that even at the highest levels of the regime, there was this undercurrent of violence and instability. The rumors surrounding Ramphis's death suggest the paranoia and potential power struggles that continued even after Trujillo was gone.
It's interesting how Trujillo couldn't even control his own family. Remember the story of Ramphis's disastrous return from the U.S.? Trujillo was furious.
Yeah, it's almost ironic. This supposedly all-powerful ruler, unable to manage his own children,
Yeah.
it really highlights the personal failures hiding beneath that veneer of absolute authority.
And the impact of the OAS sanctions on the Dominican economy, as we see in Senator Chirino's conversation, shows that even a regime like this is vulnerable to pressure from the outside world.
Right, those sanctions caused real economic hardship. They demonstrate that even the most authoritarian regimes aren't immune to global condemnation and can face tangible consequences for their actions.
For sure. And Trujillo seemed to be aware of his family's greed and his constant attempts to control them. It points to a deep cynicism about the very system he created.
I think so. Recognizing his family's self-serving motives suggests a degree of isolation and a possible understanding that the loyalty he demanded was often transactional rather than genuine.
Interesting. You know that Dominican Party slogan? Rectitude, liberty, true work, morality.
Yeah.
It's such a stark contrast to the reality of his rule. It's a prime example of propaganda at work.
It is the glaring contradiction between those lofty words and what Dominicans actually experienced under Trujillo exposes the regime's manipulative use of language to create this false image of itself.
It's really striking. We also learn about Antonio Imbert and his long-held secret disillusionment with Trujillo. It proves that opposition could simmer even among those who were seemingly loyal.
Exactly. Imbert's story shows how faith in the regime could erode, even among its initial supporters, eventually leading to acts of defiance.
Right. And Imbert's insistence on absolute secrecy among the conspirators, it emphasizes the constant fear they lived with and the risk of betrayal at every turn.
In that climate of fear and surveillance, limiting knowledge was key to survival for the resistance.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Urania's reunion with her cousin Lucinda really highlights the long-term personal consequences of the Trujillo era. They had such contrasting life experiences after the regime fell.
Their different paths show the varied and lasting impacts of that period on individuals and families, even after Trujillo was out of the picture.
And then there's Urania's explanation for why she never married. It suggests a possible emotional detachment, maybe even a lasting psychological effect from what she experienced.
Yeah, that's possible. It hints at the profound and lasting trauma she endured, something that could have affected her ability to form intimate relationships.
That's heartbreaking. And then there's that photograph of Urania's graduation.
Yeah.
Sister Mary kept Senator Cabral informed about her.
Right.
It reveals that despite the huge rift between them, there were still these attempts at connection, however indirect.
It is poignant, even with all the hurt and betrayal.
It is. Now, as we think about Urania's return and these pieces of the past, consider just how personal these historical events truly are. Mindful Moments and our podcasts, an AI audiobook analysis YouTube channel, explores these intersections of memory, history, and individual experience within broader societal contexts. If you're interested in delving deeper into these layers, their analyses are definitely worth checking out.
I agree. Urania wrestles with a complex range of emotions: bitterness, melancholy, anger, maybe even a sense of numbness.
Right.
It reflects the often unpredictable psychological impact of trauma.
It makes sense. And then she invents this lover, Steve, as a way to deflect scrutiny from Lucinda.
Yeah,
It shows a continued need to protect herself, even from her own family.
absolutely. It suggests this lingering distrust and an unwillingness to be completely vulnerable, even with those closest to her.
The scene in her father's room is powerful. His few possessions stand in stark contrast to the power he once had.
It does. That image of the once powerful senator surrounded by so little serves as a stark reminder of the temporary nature of worldly authority and the humbling effect of time.
It's a sobering thought. The conversation between Trujillo and Simon Gittleman about that 1937 massacre of Haitians, prompted by a seemingly innocent question about the date, is truly chilling.
It is. It exposes the cold, calculated cruelty at the heart of the regime.
Right.
Trujillo's casual recounting of the event and Cabral's attempts to justify it based on prejudice are deeply disturbing.
And Trujillo's justification for those killings, his use of historical grievances.
Yeah,
It's a classic tactic, manipulating the past to make present atrocities seem acceptable.
exactly. By twisting those historical narratives, Trujillo aimed to legitimize his brutal actions and incite nationalist sentiment against a scapegoated group.
It's a horrifying strategy. Trujillo's paranoia and need for control are even more evident in his reaction to General Roman appearing in his uniform,
Right.
and in how he publicly humiliated General Diaz.
These incidents really highlight his deep-seated insecurity and his constant need to assert his dominance through fear and humiliation.
It's sad, really. Shifting gears for a moment, we get a glimpse into Pedro Livio's perspective during the assassination attempt. We feel the tension and anticipation of the conspirators.
This shift in perspective allows us to viscerally experience the high stakes and incredible courage of those who risked everything to bring an end to Trujillo's reign of terror.
Yes. The ambush itself, Pedro Livio's capture, and his brutal torture by Ramphis' allies are a stark reminder of the regime's brutality.
And of the incredible bravery of those who dared to resist.
Pedro Livio's suffering is a testament to that. Then we meet Manuel Alfonso, a man who used to procure women for Trujillo.
Yes.
He's frail now, battling cancer, but his loyalty to Trujillo remains strong.
Manuel Alfonso represents a particular kind of loyalty, perhaps rooted in dependence and self-preservation. It highlights the corrupting influence of Trujillo's power, how it could warp even basic human decency.
It's a strange kind of loyalty. And then there's that unsettling invitation to a party at Trujillo's ranch, extended only to Urania.
It's so strange. The unusual nature of that invitation and Senator Cabral's unease immediately raise red flags.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what Trujillo's true motives are. Urania's experience at that party is really disturbing. Her initial naivety contrasting with the over-the-top, almost vulgar opulence of Mahogany House. And then, of course, that horrifying encounter with Trujillo. It's a turning point.
It is. That pivotal moment lays bare the horrific abuse of power that was so intertwined with Trujillo's authority.
It's awful.
And it underscores the sexual exploitation that was rampant within the regime.
After the assassination attempt, we see the assassins escaping and the varied reactions of those who helped them. It shows the spectrum of fear and resistance that existed within the population.
Exactly. The aftermath of that attempt was chaotic and dangerous. It reveals both the pervasive fear that gripped many and the courageous acts of solidarity that emerged from others.
And then we get these final glimpses of Trujillo on his last day. his interactions with others, his paranoia, that evening walk where everyone shows him such deference out of fear.
Yeah. Those last moments depict a man still clinging to power, seemingly unaware of the imminent threat. His actions reveal his vanity and the atmosphere of terror he cultivated.
It's eerie
Yeah.
seeing those last moments, knowing what's about to happen. The immediate aftermath of Trujillo's death is a whirlwind of reactions.
It is. The frantic responses of his family and inner circle, the sudden power vacuum, Balaguer's calculated moves to seize control, it all highlights the scramble for power in the wake of his death.
It's fascinating how quickly things shift. Urania's departure and final reflection suggest a long journey ahead of her, one filled with unresolved emotions.
Her farewells reveal the deep and lingering wounds of the past,
Yeah.
and her quiet contemplation suggests that healing will be a long and difficult process.
As she leaves, we're left to contemplate those central themes of her return. The deep and lasting scars left by the Trujillo regime, the complexity of memory and forgiveness, and the immense human cost of dictatorship. By exploring Urania's personal story, we've gained a much deeper understanding of this period in Dominican history, going beyond the simple facts.
We have. I think it's so important to think about how individual memories, both those shared and those kept secret, shape our understanding of history.
That's a great point.
How does the past continue to influence the present? And what untold stories are still waiting to be brought to light?
Those are important questions to consider. To delve deeper into this powerful story, you can find a link to purchase The Feast of the Goat in our show notes. If you enjoyed this exploration, please subscribe and share it with others who appreciate these nuanced perspectives. And most importantly, continue to question and think critically about the narratives that shape our world.